Hello and welcome to Daily News Simplified, an analysis of the Hindu newspaper from UPSC perspective. Today we will discuss the daily edition of the Hindu newspaper dated 5th March 2020. And the articles that we will discuss today are displayed on your screen. So let us start our discussion. Now this data point on page number 11 talks about the non-proliferation of nuclear weapons treaty, or which is famously known as the NPT. And to date, this treaty has completed 50 years from the day it became effective on the 5th March 1970. So in this regard, this data point talks about the performance of this treaty in the last 50 years. Now in this context, this nuclear non-proliferation treaty can become important for us from the preliminary examination point of view, because already in the year 2018, a question was asked related to nuclear suppliers group. And this question read, what is or are the consequences of a country becoming the member of nuclear suppliers group? First is that it will have access to the latest and most efficient nuclear technologies, which was a correct answer. However, the second statement was wrong, that it automatically becomes a member of the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons. This is because for a country to become a member of the nuclear suppliers group, it has to first become a member of the NPT treaty and not the other way around. So the correct answer was A, that is 1 only. So in this context, let us look at the key features of the NPT, which are important for us from the preliminary examination point of view. Now, some of the important points that should be noted about this NPT treaty is that it aims at preventing the spread of nuclear weapons and nuclear weapons technology. And also it aims at promoting the cooperation in peaceful uses of nuclear energy. And it also aims to further the goal of achieving nuclear disarmament and general and complete disarmament of nuclear weapons. So simply it aims at preventing the spread of nuclear weapons to those nations which do not possess the nuclear weapons as of now. And for those countries which possess the nuclear weapons, it aims at disarmament of such nuclear weapons itself. Now, one of the important points that should be noted about the NPT is that this treaty represents the only binding commitment in a multilateral treaty to the goal of disarmament by the nuclear weapon states, which is an extremely important point for us from the preliminary examination point of view. And the safeguards under this treaty have been established under the responsibility of International Atomic Energy Agency, or the IAEA. And these safeguards are used to verify the compliance with the treaty through the inspections which are conducted by the IAEA. So this is the way in which the compliance of different countries to the NPT treaty is ascertained by the inspections which are conducted by the International Atomic Energy Agency. And also the treaty promotes cooperation in the field of peaceful nuclear technology and equal access to this technology for all the states parties. And at the same time, it aims at preventing the diversion of fissile materials for the nuclear weapon use, or the fissile material which is used in the creation of nuclear weapons. So these are few important points related to the NPT which are important for preliminary examination and can be asked in the exam. Now another important point that should be noted is that the 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council have signed this NPT treaty. However, the 3 countries which possess the nuclear weapons and have not signed this treaty include India, Israel and Pakistan. And in this line, India did not sign the NPT because India thinks that this NPT has created a clubs of nuclear haves and nuclear have-nots, which means that it is a discriminatory treaty and it has created a world where some countries possess the nuclear weapons and makes them more powerful as compared to other countries which do not possess the nuclear weapons. So the membership of the NPT, further the main objectives, and also the nature of this treaty, that is, it is a binding commitment, and also the compliance to this treaty is ascertained by the inspections which are conducted by the International Atomic Energy Agency, are few important points for us from the preliminary examination point of view. Now this article on page number 1 is related to the decision of the Supreme Court which has annulled the circular of the Reserve Bank of India which had banned the banks from dealing with the virtual currency exchanges. So in this regard, this will form a part of the General Studies paper 3 under the topic Indian Economy. So in this background, let us first look at what was the background and what was the RBI circular about, and why has Supreme Court set aside that circular by the Reserve Bank of India? So in 2018, the Reserve Bank of India had banned the banks from dealing with the virtual currency exchanges and individual holders on the ground that such virtual currencies had no underlying fiat and that it was necessary in the larger public interest to stop banks from providing any service related to these. So in short, RBI had banned the banks and individuals from holding any kind of cryptocurrency. And this ban is famously known as ban on the cryptocurrencies or virtual currencies in India. Now, the Supreme Court of India has set aside this ban by the Reserve Bank of India on the banks and the financial institutions from dealing with the virtual currency holders and exchanges. And the court has said that the ban by the Reserve Bank of India did not pass the proportionality test. And the test of proportionality of any action by the government, the court held that must pass the test of Article 19(1)(g). And this Article 19(1)(g) states that all the citizens of the country will have the right to practice any profession and carry on any occupation or trade and business. So simply the Reserve Bank of India had banned the cryptocurrency dealings, and the Supreme Court in its recent judgment has set aside this ban. Now this issue of ban on the cryptocurrency is an ongoing issue and has been covered previously also in the DNS videos. So what we will do is that we will revise from a previous DNS video where we have covered the views of Inter-Ministerial Committee which was framed to look into the ban by the Reserve Bank of India on the cryptocurrency. So in this we will look at what are the virtual currencies and why were the cryptocurrencies banned in India in the first, or what were the reasons that were given by the Reserve Bank of India for banning the cryptocurrencies. And what were the views of this Inter-Ministerial Committee which was created to analyze and review the ban of the RBI on the cryptocurrencies in India. Now further we know that the cryptocurrencies are based on blockchain technologies. So in the description of today's video, you will find a link to the video where we have discussed about the blockchain technology in detail. So let us revise from the previous DNS video regarding the various issues related to the ban on cryptocurrency. Now first let us understand what is meant by the term virtual currencies. So simply a virtual currency is a digital representation of value that can be digitally traded and functions as first a medium of exchange, a unit of account, or a store of value. However, such currency or such virtual currencies are not legal tender and they do not have the backing of a government. So simply any group of people on internet can opt for a virtual currency without the backing of the government. And that virtual currency can be used as a medium of exchange. It can be used as a unit of account or a store of value. However, all such currencies are not legal tender and they do not have the backing of the government or the central bank of a country. And cryptocurrency is simply a subset of these virtual currencies, and it is decentralized and governs on the function of blockchain technology, and these are protected by cryptography. So here what is meant by blockchain technology, and various aspects of the blockchain have been discussed in the DNS of 21st July 2019. That is, recently we have discussed all the aspects of the blockchain technology. So you should go through this video to understand the various aspects of blockchain technology. And here it is important to understand that cryptocurrency functions on the basis of this blockchain technology, which is decentralized in nature. Now after this, let us understand what is the view of this Inter-Ministerial Committee on the cryptocurrencies. So regarding the view of this Inter-Ministerial Committee on the distributed ledger technologies or the blockchain technologies and the cryptocurrencies, it recognizes the potential of the blockchain technology. And it accepts that internationally the application of blockchain technology is being explored in the areas of trade finance, mortgage loan applications, digital identity management or KYC or know your customer requirements, cross-border fund transfers, and clearing and settlement systems. So as the IMC has recognized the potential of the blockchain technologies and the cryptocurrency, it has recommended the Department of Economic Affairs to take necessary measures to facilitate the use of these distributed ledger technologies or the blockchain technologies in the entire financial field after identifying its uses. Further, it has recommended that regulators like RBI, the Securities and Exchange Board of India, Insurance Regulatory Development Authority, and the Pension Fund Regulatory Development Authority to explore evolving appropriate regulations for the development of blockchain technology in their respective areas. So in short, the IMC has recommended that there should be proper regulation by various regulators like the RBI and SEBI for exploring the development of blockchain technology in their respective fields. However, one point should be noted that the IMC has recommended a ban on the private cryptocurrencies, which indirectly means that it recognizes that there should be a cryptocurrency which can be unveiled by the Reserve Bank of India or the RBI. This is particularly because such a cryptocurrency will have the backing of the Central Bank of India, which is the Reserve Bank of India. However, the private cryptocurrencies do not have a backing of the government or the central bank, and that is why it has recommended a ban on such currencies. Further, it is to be noted that the RBI Act has the enabling provisions to permit the central government to approve a central bank digital currency as a legal tender in India. So in this background, let us understand why the IMC has recommended a ban on the private cryptocurrencies and what are the dangers or issues with the implementation or the use of private cryptocurrencies. Now, the main contention of the Interministerial Committee is that without a central regulating authority, such private cryptocurrencies can have negative consequences. So the first concern that has been raised is that non-official virtual currencies can be used to defraud consumers, particularly those consumers which come from vulnerable sections or unsophisticated consumers or the investors. And an example of this is the Bitcoin-related Ponzi scheme, which resulted in a fraud of around rupees 2,000 crore. And regarding Ponzi schemes, you should note that these are such investment schemes which are not based on any asset, and that is why ultimately they lose their valuations and lead to a loss for the investors. The second concern is that these private cryptocurrencies often experience tremendous volatility in their value. For example, Bitcoin was selling at $20,000 per coin in December 2017. However, in less than a year, it was trading at just $3,800 per coin, which shows that its value has been fluctuating a lot in the recent times. And that is why such volatility poses severe challenges for investors. Thirdly, the committee has said that in a country like India, where lakhs of traders get involved in such currencies, and particularly small and retail traders, this could have huge negative implications. Now, another important concern which has been raised by the Interministerial Committee is related to the environmental concerns of creation and circulation of private cryptocurrencies. So the report highlights that the scaling up of currency system over a large population would require crippling levels of energy resources. And as we have learned in the video of blockchain that use of blockchain technology and the generation of cryptocurrency requires a lot of processing power, and that is why it requires a lot of energy. And due to the increasing levels of energy consumption, it can lead to an environmental disaster. The third concern of the IMC is related to the power of RBI in regulating such currencies. And this report highlights that if private cryptocurrencies are allowed to function as legal tender, the RBI would lose control over the monetary policy and financial stability. This is because it would not be able to keep a tap on the money supply in the economy. Now, as we know that currently RBI regulates the monetary system of India and also tries and controls the inflation and various other aspects of the economy. However, if such private cryptocurrencies are floated and they are not regulated by a centralized authority, the power of RBI will be lost considerably. Another major concern is the anonymity of such private digital currencies and cryptocurrencies. And this anonymity can lead to instances of money laundering and use of this money for terrorist financing activities. And it would further make it difficult for the law enforcement agencies to control such cryptocurrencies. And finally, the report highlights that there is no grievance redressal mechanism in such a system. And this is because all the transactions are irreversible in nature. And as we have learned in the video of blockchain technology, no tampering can be done with the data in the blockchains. So these are few concerns which have been raised by the report of the Interministerial Committee. Now, after this, let us understand the ways in which the cryptocurrencies are regulated in various other countries. So this table lists down the various aspects of the cryptocurrencies. For example, is it considered as a legal tender in one country or not? Or is it allowed as a payment method, as an investment token, or is this currency being traded in the crypto exchanges. Now, as far as cryptocurrency as a legal tender is concerned, it has not been allowed in any of the countries, for example, Russia, China, Switzerland, Thailand, Japan, etc. However, cryptocurrency has been identified as a payment method by Switzerland, Thailand, Japan, with some restrictions in New York as well as in Canada. Further, it has been recognized as an investment asset or as investment token by Russia, Switzerland, Thailand, Japan, New York, Canada, etc. However, China is the only currency which has outrightly banned cryptocurrency and is not allowed as either legal tender, payment method, investment token, and has not allowed cryptocurrencies to be traded on crypto exchanges. Now, as various jurisdictions are allowing the use of cryptocurrency to a limited extent, except China, the editorial argues that the government should not resort to outright banning of such currencies and should regulate such currencies to explore the use of new and advanced technologies on which the cryptocurrencies are based. So these were few aspects of the cryptocurrencies and why are the private cryptocurrencies banned. And these can be important aspects for us from mains examination point of view. And with this, let's move to the next article. Now, recently the government had announced the consolidation of 10 public sector banks, which included the merger of the Oriental Bank of Commerce, the United Bank of India into the Punjab National Bank, and also various other amalgamations of the public sector banks. Now, in this line, the banks have submitted their scheme of amalgamation to the cabinet, and in this line, the cabinet has given its approval to such amalgamation. So, the merger of the public sector banks has been approved by the cabinet in this line, and it forms an important part of the General Studies paper 3 under the topic Economic Development. Now, you might be knowing that previously also various other bank amalgamations have taken place. And one of the important amalgamation or the merger was that of the State Bank of India with its various associate banks like the State Bank of Bikaner and Jaipur, etc. So in this article, let us look at what is the logic of merger of public sector banks and what are the likely challenges that will be faced in such kind of merger. So in this news article, the government has recently announced a mega amalgamation plan of the public sector banks. And in this, 10 public sector banks will be merged into 4 larger entities. Now, this step is mainly aimed at improving their financial health and enhancing their lending capacity to support the growth. Further, besides the merger of these banks, the government also announced an equity infusion move of about rupees 55,250 crores. And this has mainly been done in order to improve their lending capacities. Now, this is not the first time that government has announced the merger of public sector banks, and previously also twice the public sector banks have been merged. So this is the third merger which has been announced by the government. And after this announcement, the number of state-owned or the government-owned banks is down to 12 from the present 27 number. So these are a few important takeaways from the government's announcement. So first is that banks have been merged on the basis of likely operating efficiencies, also better usage of equity and their technological platform. So as we have learned, the first 3 banks were merged because of technological compatibility, and this is likely to improve the operating efficiencies. Also, we know that the government has infused equity to the amount of rupees 55,000 crores. So due to the mergers and targeted equity, there will be better usage of such equity. Also, the main objective of this step is to create banks of global level that can leverage economies of scale and balance sheet size to serve the needs of a $5 trillion economy by 2025. Now, presently, the size of the banks is small, and as such, they are not able to lend to large infrastructure projects. So by merger of these banks, this will create economies of scale and also will create banks which have big balance sheets so that they can invest in large and long-term infrastructure projects. And also presently there are too many banks in India which have sizes that are very small as compared to the global standards. And since these banks are of small size as compared to the global standards, they are not likely to grow in the near future or not likely to expand in the near future. And that is why the government is now creating big entities so that they can expand in the near future. Now, besides positive aspects of the mergers of banks, various concerns have been raised by various experts. So one of the concerns which have been raised is that although the consolidation of banks will improve the scale of operations of the banks and will increase their competitiveness. However, there will not be any immediate improvement in the credit matrix as all of these banks have relatively weak solvency profiles. So, what is meant by this is that although such a consolidation looks attractive at this point, however, most of these banks are already suffering from the problem of non performing assets. And a merger of such banks which are already having non performing assets is not likely to improve their competitiveness, and also this will not improve the credit growth in the Indian economy. Now, besides the issue of non performing assets, there are chances that such a merger will now create more friction. Now, this is mainly because previously, when the merger happened, one of the banks was a large bank, and the other banks which were merged with that large banks were small in size. However, in the present situation, all of these banks are mostly among larger banks, and all these banks are not necessarily in their strong economic health. Now, although there are some benefits and positives that these have similar technologies, and that is why such integration is likely to be smoother. However, because the size of these banks is large as compared to the previous mergers, there is likely to be a bit of friction. Now, another issue is that of human resource integration. So, in this regard, concerns have been raised that initially there will be more focus on management streamlining and human resource integration, and this would impact the loan growth and will reduce the focus on strengthening the asset quality in the short term. This is because initially the main focus of such mergers will be on smooth integration and management streamlining. So in such a scenario, the credit growth is likely to be impacted. Now further, there are chances that after the integration, most of the branches of such banks will be rationalized or reduced in number. And due to this, many staff members or the employees of such banks would fear a job loss. And in such a background, these mergers will create more friction and will not be very helpful to the economy. Now, previously, the Narasimhan Committee, which was created for banking reforms, has suggested or recommended the shutting down of weaker banks, and it had not favored the merging of such weak banks with the strong ones. However, presently, what is being done is that weak banks are being merged together. So in such a scenario, it is highly unlikely that the position or the economic situation of such banks will improve in the short term. Another criticism is that the focus of government has mainly been on merging and creating big banks. However, there has been lack of focus on the governance and management reforms in these banks. So in this regard, the suggestion is that the key reform to be made are at the board level, which includes the appointments which are from the government side or the government nominees. This is mainly because the government nominees in the boards of the banks are generally appointed on the basis of political considerations and not on the basis of efficiency and efficacy. So in such a scenario, professionalism in governance is a key to the success and not just the size of the banks. Now, besides all these issues, it has been argued that a failure of very large bank may have more adverse impact on economy, similar to the one which was witnessed in the global economic recession of 2008. Now, what happened in 2008's global economic recession was that big banks of the United States of America had failed. And in such a scenario, the governments had to bail out such banks because these large banks are considered as too big to fail. Now, as these banks are considered as too big to fail, there are chances that these banks will not follow the norms or the provisions of the central bank authority. And why these banks are likely to do this is because these have the assurance that these are too big to fail and will also get the support of the government in the times of crisis. So in such a scenario, just creating large banks is not enough, and the main focus of the government should be on improving the governance of these banks. And there should be more professionalism in the governance of these banks. So these were few points related to the merger of the banks. What was the logic behind such a merger? And what are the likely challenges which are to be faced after such mergers? Now, if you look at the previous year questions which were asked in the preliminary examination, this question in the year 2018 read, with reference to the governance of public sector banking in India, consider the following statements. The first is that the capital infusion into public sector banks by the government of India has steadily increased in the last decade. Now, this statement is incorrect because the capital infusion by the government in the public sector banks has been fluctuating and has not been constantly or steadily increasing. Now, the second statement is that to put the public sector banks in order, the merger of Associate Bank with the parent State Bank of India has been affected. So, as we have learned, one of the main objective of the mergers of the banks is to put the public sector banks in order, and that is why this statement was correct. Hence, the correct answer was B, that is 2 only. Now, further in this article, we have read that the first three banks were merged because of the same or technological compatibility, and they are working on the Finacle core banking solutions. And previously in the year 2016, a question was asked which read, the term core banking solutions is sometimes seen in the news. Which of the following statements best describes or describe this term? So first statement is that it is a network of a bank's branches which enables customers to operate their accounts from any branch of the bank on its network, regardless of where they open their accounts. And this precisely is the definition of core banking solutions. However, the second statement that it is an effort to increase RBI's control over the commercial banks through computerization is incorrect. And thirdly, it is a detailed procedure by which a bank with huge non-performing assets is taken over by another bank is also incorrect. Hence, the correct answer here was 1 only and A. So similarly, mergers of the public banks, their objectives and aims should be kept in mind. With this, let's move to the next article. Now, this article on page number 11 is related to the foreign policy of the Trump administration, especially with regard to the international trading order. In this line, it is expected that in the upcoming elections in the United States of America, Donald Trump is likely to win the elections once again. So in this regard, the author says that the Trump administration has taken various steps which stand against the multilateral order or the multilateralism in the world trade, which was the basic principle of the World Trade Organization. And some of the decisions of the Trump administration have been negatively impacting India's foreign trade. For example, the Trump administration had removed the Generalized System of Preferences program for India. And also, the Trump administration is known to be blocking the World Trade Organization's dispute settlement mechanism. Again, the US Trade Representative has stripped India of its developing country classification for the special and differential treatment purposes which are required under the World Trade Organization. And in this regard, a question was asked in the mains examination of 2018 which reads, what are the key areas of reform if the World Trade Organization has to survive in the present context of trade war, especially keeping in mind the interest of India? Now, in the mains question discussion, we have discussed this question that was asked in the year 2018. And in that, various aspects of the reform of the World Trade Organization and especially of the appellate body of the World Trade Organization has been discussed in detail. So let us revise from that discussion of the mains examination where we have discussed various aspects of this question which will help us in understanding the important issue related to the WTO's dispute settlement. So today we will discuss the question which was related to the reforms that are required in the WTO in the context of the trade war and especially keeping in mind the interest of India. So this will fall under the General Studies paper 2 of the mains examination under the subtopic Important International Institutions, Their Structure and Mandate. So let us try to understand the approach for writing such questions. Now, as you may be already aware that United States has been involved in tariff wars with China, India and other countries. Now, the WTO has emerged as the main resolution body in the ongoing trade war. Now, in the Daily News Simplified of 20th July 2018, we have discussed about the trade war that is going on between India and United States. Further, you should understand that WTO is involved in the resolution of such trade wars with the use of its dispute settlement mechanism, which has also been explained in the same DNS of 20th July 2018. Now, the context of this answer could have been the trade war between India and US, and another part of this answer could have been the dispute settlement mechanism of WTO. However, now the question arises about the reform of WTO. Now, the issue of WTO reform was covered in the September edition of the Focus under the topic 10th BRICS Summit. Now, at this summit, BRICS countries, including India, asserted that the dispute in the selection process of new appellate body members needs to be quickly resolved with regard to WTO. Now, this issue for the selection process of new appellate body was to be resolved quickly because it paralyzed the dispute settlement mechanism of WTO. Now, when we talk about the WTO reform in the present context, it is basically about the WTO's appellate body. Now, the issue of reform of WTO's appellate body has also been covered in the September edition of Focus. And regarding this, the Focus reads that The dispute settlement mechanism of WTO has been in news in the context of being a resolution medium in the ongoing trade wars between US and other countries, including India. And if you notice, the statement is similar to the context of the question of the mains examination. Now, this section of the focus also discussed about the dispute settlement mechanism of WTO. However, let us try to understand what are the issues related to the appellate body of WTO. Now, regarding the appellate body's composition, you should know that it is composed of 7 members who are appointed for a term of 4 years. And they are appointed by the dispute settlement body, which comprises of all the 164 WTO members. Now, you should understand that the dispute settlement body's decisions are taken by consensus and not by majority vote. Therefore, the formal objection by any member country or member state can block the appointment or reappointment of the appellate body members. Now, this consensus method for the appointment of members to the appellate body has raised concerns in the current times. Now, the current concern is that United States has been continuously blocking the appointment of new appellate body members. And you know that the members to the appellate body are selected by a consensus method. That is why the objection of United States is not leading to appointment in the new appellate body. So in this context, the strength of appellate body has reduced from 7 to 4 and it would further reduce to 1 by December 2019 if no new member is appointed. Now the question in the exam asked about the WTO's survival in the present context. So the current concern with regard to survival is that any reduction of members below 3 would render the WTO's dispute settlement mechanism useless. This is because the appellate body requires 3 members to decide on a dispute. And apart from this, the absence of full strength has increased the workload on the present members and has reduced the efficiency of the appellate body. Now, this lead editorial on page number 10 is related to the Afghan peace deal or the US deal with the Taliban. And in this line, you should note that the details of the Afghan deal have been covered in the DNS of 1st March 2020, that is very recently. So you should go through this video to understand the various aspects of this Afghan deal. For example, what was the background and what the peace deal is all about, and what are the commitments of United States of America in this, and what will be the commitments of Taliban under this peace deal. So do go through this video to understand the various aspects of the Afghan deal. Now, this editorial on page number 10 is related to the recent move of the Office of High Commissioner for the Human Rights to move to the Supreme Court of India against the Citizenship Amendment Act. And various details of this Office of High Commissioner for the Human Rights have been provided or discussed in the Daily News Simplified of 4th March 2020, that is yesterday. So important aspects of this body have been covered in this video, which can be important for us from the preliminary examination point of view. So you should go through this video to understand these aspects. Now, after today's discussion, let us take up these practice questions from our preliminary examination point of view, and the answer for these questions will be discussed after 5 seconds. So the first question is that which of the following statements is or are correct about the NPT treaty? First is that it is the only binding commitment in a multilateral treaty to the goal of disarmament by the nuclear weapons state, which is a correct statement as we have read. Secondly, the compliance of a nation to this treaty is ascertained by the inspections of the IAEA or the International Atomic Energy Agency, which is also a correct statement, and hence the correct answer is C, both 1 and 2. Second question is that which of the following statements is or are correct about the appellate body of World Trade Organization? First is that it is composed of 7 members which are appointed for a term of 4 years by the dispute settlement body, which is a correct statement. And second is that the dispute settlement body comprises of all the members of WTO, which is also correct and a unique statement. So the correct answer here again is C, both 1 and 2. So with this we conclude today's discussion. Now let's take up the question for the day.